alleges Paul Manafort funneled more than $18 million through shell companies, used the money to buy luxury cars, real estate, and more. Now, a separate indictment was unsealed against George Papadopoulos. He is a former unpaid volunteer Trump campaign foreign advisor, revealing he pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about his dealings with Kremlin-connected individuals digging up dirt about Hillary Clinton. This, as Democrat power lobbyist Tony Podesta, founder of the Podesta Group, is stepping down from his lobbying shop after coming under investigation by special counsel Robert Mueller over his work in the Ukraine. Look who's here, Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz join me now. Good to see you, Alan.
Nice to be here.
So the indictment doesn't mention Russian collusion, Russian meddling, Trump, or the Trump campaign, but you think that, and by the way, you predicted all of this, that this would happen back in your book that came out in September,
That's right.
Trumped Up.
Yeah.
And you've come on the show. You said this was coming. What is the aim of Robert Mueller here? Is he trying to flip Paul Manafort to get to bigger fruit?
Oh, of course. I mean, the object of going after Manafort for crimes that had nothing to do with his mandate to look at the Russian collusion is to leverage him into testifying against the next domino and then the next domino. Ultimately, Mueller is going after the big domino in the Oval Office. It's a tactic often used against organized crime, sometimes corporate crime, sometimes terrorism, rarely, but sometimes against political figures as well. But it's a dangerous tactic because the cooperating witness knows that the better his testimony, the sweeter the deal. And so cooperating witnesses often tend to exaggerate or lie. Instead of just singing, they compose and they make up stories in order to get themselves a better deal. So, you know, this is not something that we ought to immediately say this is a wonderful, wonderful development. People who care about civil liberties and the rule of law have long been concerned about flipped witnesses and cooperating
It's
witnesses.
interesting you say that because now the implication is that this is the fallout, the charges brought today, the fallout over the president firing FBI Director James Comey. But you're saying that, and by the way, these charges cover events that occurred before Manafort began running Trump's campaign. You're saying the fallout here is that Manafort basically could start embellishing things, and is the Mueller team do they have enough down the middle integrity to stop that?
If they know about it, they'll stop it. And if his lawyers know about it, they'll stop it. But smart defendants sometimes figure out a way of exaggerating, just putting a little bit more spin on the evidence to make it more palatable to the prosecutors. In 53 years of practicing criminal law, I've seen plenty of that. Now, when it's done against your political enemies, you'll love it. When it's done against political friends, you hate it. I hate it always. As a civil libertarian, I care deeply about the rule of law, whether it impacts Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. And that's the way I try to call it in Trumped Up.
Well, you say this is criminalizing policy differences,
absolutely.
right?
And we're seeing it on both sides. You don't like what somebody does, lock them up, lock her up.
I think we've got a soundbite from retired Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters commenting. I love your reaction to what Colonel Peters says. Roll tape.
Is whether or not Vladimir Putin has undue influence or has had undue influence on a presidential administration. And let us hope that when the Mueller probe is done, that we'll find that President Trump has no involvement. But we've got to pursue it to the end, that every American, right or left, should want to know with certainty that Vladimir Putin has no influence.
Yeah, Trey Gowdy has said the same thing.
So that's
Lindsey
the
Graham. Just get to the bottom of it.
The best argument against having a special counsel.
Why?
Special counsel is looking only for crimes. There are no crimes in collusion. Take the worst case scenario.
Is there even a federal criminal statute that says collusion?
No. Let's take the worst case scenario. This never happened. Candidate Trump calls Vladimir Putin and says, Vlad, do I have a deal for you? You want to get rid of the sanctions. I want to be president. You help me be president. I'll help you get rid of the sanctions. Terrible, horrible. Not a crime. There's nothing in the criminal statute book against that. Maybe there should be, but there isn't. That's why we should never have had a special counsel. We should have had a bipartisan or nonpartisan independent commission like 9/11, like the Warren Commission, looking into the relationship between Russia and American elections, whether it impacts Democrats or Republicans.
That's correct. In other words, both sides of the political aisle.
Absolutely.
Correct?
We want to get to the bottom of it. And the one thing about criminal prosecution, it doesn't get get to the bottom of it. All it does is it prosecutes people based on proof beyond a reasonable doubt behind the closed doors of grand juries, exactly the opposite of what
it's a great point, because a bipartisan approach commission would have been transparent, you would think, right?
That's right.
So here's the bottom line. I mean, there's been a corrosive alleged influence by Russia through social media, poisoning the basically what was going on last year via false advertising to maybe suppress the vote and divide people, right? Is that the worst thing?
They've been doing this for years. They've been doing it in all countries of Europe. They've done it in South America. Look, our CIA did it a little bit in, South America and Iran as well. We're not blameless on this, but the Russians have developed it to an art, and they're still doing it. That's why we ought to get to the bottom of it. I don't know if they want to help Clinton or if they want to help Trump, and that's not the issue. The issue is they're trying to tamper with an American election, and all Americans, Democrat or Republican, should be concerned about getting to the bottom of that.
And the professor makes an important point. We're going to get to Ben Stein. Russia's been in and out of recession now for 20 years. They're basically a third world economy. So, of course, they're going to be doing things like that, right?
Right, yeah.
Alan Dershowitz, get his book, Trumped Up. Alan Dershowitz said this is going to happen back in the summer, back in September. He was on the show, Trumped Up. Buy the book. It's terrific stuff. Good to see you, Alan. Thanks for coming in.